how to prioritize self-care in your life and what that looks like for you.
Yeah, well, to be honest, for many years, especially when I met you back at Hofstra University, I was not the best at self-care for a long time. I mean, I was super involved on campus, having joined multiple clubs, orchestra, and somehow making time to socialize. And once I graduated in spring of 2020 and was desperate to find a post-grad job when no one was really hiring, and then eventually I did land a job, it took me breaking down. I mean, literally physically breaking down in my room that I worked in virtually and feeling overwhelmed with all the responsibilities that I had and feeling a lack of direction in my career to come to terms with the fact that I needed to realign my priorities, first of all, and be okay with not being the best at everything, which was an internal pressure that I put on myself from a young age, being a first generation immigrant, to finally start actually doing things for myself. You see, back then, college, post-college, Paula, my motivation for progressing in my life, in my classes, and all the activities that I was doing was solely to make my parents proud and ensure that their sacrifices moving to this country weren't in vain. So honestly, anytime I failed or I didn't get the outcome I expected, I would reflect that failure upon myself. Like I didn't try hard enough, like I wasn't good enough, or I just kept telling myself that I'm going to keep on failing. But once I made that decision to actually put in the effort to appreciate myself more, that's when I realized, wow, we really did that. Like we really did all of these things, or wow, I'm really a bad bee. And I'm going to censor that because I don't know if I can curse or not on here.
You can.
But okay, I'm a bad bitch, you know, but yeah, like what I do. Yes. But what I do currently to, you know, just keep reinforcing my values is I have sticky notes on my computer with affirmations of why I'm where I am and that I truly deserve all the wins that I've gotten in my life. And on my work computer, I have a folder, and I did this just because one of my mentors suggested it. And in that folder, I have screenshots of every time I got a compliment from one of my clients or supervisors, or whenever I get a recognition sticker, which is something my company does. Like you can officially recognize and send a sticker to a fellow team member that is killing it. And,
I love that.
That's good. Yeah. And then outside of work, I've been consistently going to the gym right after I log off, so I could really take my mind off everything. I literally just blast music in my noise canceling headphones and zone out. And then once I get home, I just jam on my ukulele or sing to my plush animals because yes, adults can have plushies. Or, you know, right now, actually, I'm learning the electric guitar. So yeah, it's really the little things that go a long way.
Yeah. Well, and you said something really important that I think it's important for people to remember. And I've heard this before. Two of the people that helped me found the podcast in 2021 both come from our first generation, both immigrant families from different countries. That pressure is real. And I have heard that time and time again that you all put on yourselves, that sometimes your parents inadvertently do without intending. They just... They do it out of love. They do it out of care. They do it, you know, the whole move was made for the betterment, but it's a lot. And it's a lot at a young age. And I feel like sometimes you all have to grow up before you're ready to. And because of that weight that comes with it and just the experiences that come with it, that other people that have been in this country for generations don't have to deal with. They just don't have to. So I'm so glad you spoke to that. Confidently setting boundaries. You mentioned this. You were the involved woman on campus, and you, correct me if I'm wrong, but from my purview, it was like you were fighting with a vengeance, with a chip on your shoulder, to push walls down and create spaces because you had to. I mean, that was unfortunately required. But you talked about being in your room that one day, and oh my God, you were a 2020 grad on top of everything else. I mean, just add another layer to the chaos. And you talk about that day in your room. Was that a day too that kind of helped you realize? Talk to me about your boundaries. I don't want to assume anything. So talk to me about your boundaries journey.
Yeah, no, and there was definitely a connection to me, you know, finally confidently setting my boundaries and breaking down in my room late 2020 after I had landed my first post-grad job. I mean, in terms of, every relationship that I've had, I see boundaries as expectations that we have for each other, ways we can help each other grow, and just clearly defining what respects means to each person, because it could mean different things. Because you
Sure.
have conventional, unconventional types of relationships. And this is something I practice not just with my personal relationships, but also my professional ones. I mean,
Yeah.
when you're entering a business partnership of any kind, you create a contract, right?
Right.
Of what we'll be handling, how we'll be measuring progress. And also, just like in any job, there are certain responsibilities in place for each candidate so that we can help our team as a whole grow. So,
Right.
for example, when I started my most recent job earlier in April of this year, I set aside time to do one-on-ones with every single one of my supervisor, whether I was going to be working with them on a day-to-day basis or on certain projects or whatever that was, just so they could know my face, my voice, and my preferred working style. So in each of these
Yeah.
calls, I would tell them that I'm the type of person who sits back and tends to listen during a call more so than, be the center of the room, I guess, to
Yeah.
process that information that's being discussed. And then once I have time to think through my recommendations or perspective, then I will share my thoughts, more likely like offline than in a brainstorm. And I also ask them, what they're most comfortable with when it comes to providing feedback, whether they like being on calls to discuss their comments directly and why they took such approaches to their feedback, or if they just prefer to communicate these things offline. And the funny thing is that approach is not so different with my personal relationships. You have to create that unofficial contract so that we can understand each other's needs and really help each other find peace, because I think that your relationship should be your peace, should be, your support system, and not give you any troubles aside from everything else that's going on in the world, to your point, especially given everything that's been going on throughout these recent years. So I really see the two of them the same way in that sense, I guess.
Yeah. You have such a healthy grasp on that. You mentioned the first thing you mentioned that I really love was that boundaries are just establishing that respect for each other. I love that thought process with that. And two, I love that you had the intuition at your young age to know going in, I'm going to have these meetings. We are going to communicate expectations, and so that we are all on the same page going forward. There's no assumptions being made, because you're also working in a world where you can be in the office or not. And that's created some interesting dynamics for companies too, in terms of, chemistry between employees and culture and whatnot. And without that very clear communication, that can get wonky and provide some stressors. So everybody out there listening of all ages, when you go into a new job, take this and run with it. That is so good. That's a great idea.
Absolutely.
So and then and then you're not second guessing, because it's, you're starting a new job. That's enough in itself in trying to just get established. But I love that advice. I think that's just great advice for everybody. And leaders, if your people don't do that, set it up yourselves. Go to your people. Don't wait for them to come to you. Maybe they haven't thought of that or don't know it's a possibility, or there may be some fear, it's in that relationship. Break that down and create that authentic, that communication early on. So I think really applies on both sides. So thank you for that. We spoke to this a little bit already, but taking care of our emotional health as much as our physical health. You talk about you literally had a physical collapse in your room. We can all agree. I started this journey, same thing. It's all intertwined. So talk to me about your journey with that.
Yeah, so post-college, as I mentioned earlier, that's been a long journey in terms of navigating my mental health. I mean, I think many people can agree that the feeling of loneliness, confusion, and even desensitization to tragedy and horror, with all the shocking headlines that have come to light in the past couple of years, that's all been on the rise. And having all that negativity surround me at such a pivotal time in my adulthood hasn't been easy. I mean, I started doing therapy in late 2021 because I just felt really lost at that point. I won't get into too many details of what my circumstances were at that time, but that was another point where I broke down and said to myself, enough is enough. I really have to take a look at why I'm attracting negative energy in my life. So while I was assessing my situation, and I was unemployed actually at that time, so I really had a lot of time to look into this, I was
Sure.
able to, with the help of my therapist, discover that I have ADHD. Now, I did an assessment with her to find this out, and I also spoke with multiple psychiatrists to get their official diagnoses. And in a way, that was so relieving to me to understand that a part of
Yeah.
me that I was always ashamed of, right? The struggle when it came to socializing, to being productive, and just feeling so different and incompetent compared to my
Yeah.
peers. Again, I usually just thought that that was a reflection of me as a failure, as a
Sure.
disappointment. And that was
Wow.
on top of the depression and anxiety that I was already diagnosed with since I was 11. So,
Yeah.
given that context, it also made me realize that I needed to put in more effort when it came to my emotional health, in the sense of understanding my triggers when I felt mentally overstimulated, usually in larger social settings or whenever I was presenting to clients, for example, because there was that
Yeah.
bigger need to put on a mask and become a different person, because I didn't know if the real me, I don't know what you'd call it, the unhinged Latina who isn't afraid to speak her mind. Yeah, I didn't know if that was going to cut it in these situations.
Yeah.
So particularly in these moments when I caught myself feeling overwhelmed and not in control at all, I knew that if something negative were to happen, or if I felt judged in any way, I wouldn't process my emotions in a healthy manner. And honestly, I felt like I was very vulnerable in those moments, and like I would cry. So what has helped
Yeah.
me is, firstly, not giving so much power to other people when I do receive negativity. And I think I was pretty good at this from a young age because I had experienced overt racism back then.
Oh my
and
gosh.
yeah,
You've been,
not,
I mean, I would say you've been dealing with,
yeah,
I'm not surprised to hear this because you at such an early age had to deal with just
a lot.
absolute
Yeah.
safety in terms of how you were treated and your family was treated.
Absolutely. So, yeah, to your point, that's what really helped me from a young age. Just stop putting as much emphasis on that external validation, because then I'm more able to be my true self, not for others, but just for me. And I've also learned that giving myself space once things get heated and communicating that to the other party and saying, hey, I'm not feeling like myself right now. I'm not thinking rationally because I'm emotionally overwhelmed. So I cannot communicate properly until I have time to process my feelings and the situation on my own. So I separate myself from what's giving me stress or negative emotions. And I really take my time because I owe that to myself. And once I feel collected again, that's when I can properly resolve whatever the issue was. And then in terms of my physical health, as I mentioned before, I'm a huge enthusiast of going to the gym and doing it, again, not for external validation or necessarily to look better, but instead because I really want to commit to taking care of myself, just for myself, and loving myself in that way.
Well, and I think it's a way that we work out the stressors. I'm diagnosed with anxiety and a form of OCD. I feel it in my body. I have got to do, there are days that I've got to do a very specific kind of workout to get that out of my body, and to name what it is that's happening, which I do every morning. I list out how I'm feeling. And my point being, you feel it. You can feel it in your body. And just a prime example of what you shared, of listening to your body and giving it what it needs, not for anybody else, but for you and your health and your best self. And I think too, if we can switch the narrative on that, especially for women, and take that pressure off of ourselves to work out, to look at, no, I'm working out for me because it makes me feel better. It relieves my stressors. It gives me pause. It allows me to have a break in my day, because the other thing too, sometimes when you're working from home, it's hard to find that breaking point when the workday's over. I worked from home for 15 months and I had to go drive around the block to come back to kind of create that break, because I was doing all my workouts at home. And so, you have to create those spaces too for that separation, but listening to your body. And I know I keep saying this, but these are things that you had to start carrying a heavy load early. And so it's important for you to get on top of these things and have these coping mechanisms and naming. There's so much power in naming. And I feel like ADHD is so underdiagnosed in females anyway. I mean, there's study after study because it shows up differently. ADHD is not always the hyper kid, or and it feeds into so many other things. But that has to be so. It is empowering. It sounds weird, but it is empowering when you get a diagnosis because it just explains so much. Like
Exactly.
yeah, it makes it all. I was like, oh, that makes sense now. Okay, so thank you so much for sharing that and speaking to that. You are a champ at this, just kind of by the way you work in the world, as you mentioned, where you are a bad bitch Latina woman in this world, and you do this really well. But how can we support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically?
Yeah. So I'll say there's this TikTok trend that I saw a couple of months ago where people were posting photos of themselves as children and saying, when I'm being mean to myself or judging myself, I'm also saying these things to this person. And that's what really changed my mindset about how I look at self-care, how I look at empowering myself. And to me, all these practices that I've incorporated into my life are intended to heal my inner child and to treat myself because I deserve that, and to keep loving myself. So when I do simple things like getting a haircut or getting my nails done or going on a shopping spree, yeah, I do it to feel good. But in a way, when I do these things, I kind of separate myself from myself, if that makes sense, and physically say to myself, yeah, you deserve this, Paula. Let me treat you to something nice because I love you. And even in my therapy sessions, my therapist said that this type of mindfulness can apply to any situation where you're processing your feelings. So if you're confused about a decision you have to make for yourself, for example, just separate yourself from the situation and pretend like your friend is the person who's struggling and you're giving them advice. What would you tell them to do? How would you comfort them? How would you encourage them to live unapologetically? And when I have those conversations with myself, and this is going to sound random, but it really helps, I look at myself in this little mirror that I have on my desk and I ask myself these questions. I give myself advice and I just keep reinforcing the values that I truly bring out. And with my friends who have been through so much with me and have seen this dramatic shift in who I am as a person, I also remind them of their values, regardless of where they are in their journey right now. I mean, we're all in very different places. We all are different ages. And, another thing that comes to mind when it comes to empowering women is the importance of mentorship, because I would not be where I am professionally if it wasn't for the mentors, mostly women of color, who provided guidance when I needed it most, especially when I felt lost when I was unemployed. Going back to that, when I just couldn't find a job at all post-grad, whenever I was doubting myself. And even to my mentors that I directly worked with, I'm just grateful really that they took a chance with me when I felt like others wouldn't, because that's what really gave me the confidence to continuously get out of my comfort zone. And now one of my goals moving forward is to give that confidence to rising young professionals in my field who feel that same way like I did back when I was in their shoes. And I've already been able to help mentor some current college students that have reached out to me. I reinforce their values by telling them like, hey, look, regardless of your age, because I know that you might be a bit intimidated going into the corporate world. Regardless of your age, you have such valuable insights that any client, any company is just dying to know right now, because Gen Z, we're the rising consumer base. Like, we need you in the workforce. We need your ideas. We need your perspective. You have so much value, even if you didn't have that many internships, or maybe if you didn't intern at the fanciest companies, that does not matter, because you have knowledge that will help really progress how we're marketing to diverse audiences, right? We're not just marketing to one consumer base, we're marketing to many. And we want to reach these audiences in an authentic manner with meaningful messaging. And to do that, we need representation, right? That's why diversity, equity, and inclusion is so important, especially in communications. I've helped some students already, and I'm open to continue supporting more and more people that way, and teaching them what my mentors have taught me, because I don't believe in gatekeeping. I believe in helping others rise up.
I love that. That right there. I love that. I don't believe in gatekeeping, because listen, we're all better together, and we've got to do this together. as a collective, or we just keep feeding the people that are trying to keep us down, y'all down as women of color. We keep feeding, we're helping the cause if we don't come together and do this together. And there's enough room for all of it. And when you win, it creates space for someone else to win. And so getting rid of this whole scarcity mindset around that too. But I love that you're already giving back. I'm not even surprised, but there's so much power in mentoring. I'm a mentor and I didn't have one. I was a first generation college student and I didn't have one. And I always told myself, I'm going to do that differently because it is so important. And you just need those affirmations and those reminders. And your generation, you spoke something important. You all have been through some things at your ages that no one else has been through. I'm parenting 20-somethings. My 20-somethings were in college. My oldest wasn't, she was out, but my middle and younger. And I had no idea what to tell them because I had never been through that before. So you all have something to offer that's so unique. I was working with high school kids at the time in the job I had at the time. And I'm like, y'all have something unique to offer that no one else does out there in the world. So don't be afraid. And we need your knowledge because you're having to walk out things that there's no book for, that we haven't been through before. So I'm glad you brought that up too. I think that's really important. And the mentoring thing, age doesn't matter. And we all have something to offer and it's just so important to create that space. So thank you so much for speaking to that. The importance of setting and coming back to your why and your values in everything you do. You have always had, since I've known you, a lot of demands on your time. There's a lot of things you could do. You've also, as a woman of color, have to be mindful of the people that are really for you and what you're participating is a good thing and is not just them taking advantage of you or making you a member or part of their statistics. I mean, that's a tricky thing, I think, with DEI right now and DEIB, as we're seeing more and more with the belonging piece, is who's doing it for real and actually cares and wants to see this happening and wants to see more than one woman of color at the table, and who's just trying to fill numbers and not. So I know I threw a lot at you in that, but talk to me about your values, why, and choosing those spaces in everything you do.
Yeah, I mean, being in the corporate world, you hit the nail on the head there. We don't want performativism. We want action. We want accountability, and we don't want tokenism. I stand for the cause, of course. I'm passionate about it, but I'm not going to be your token person of color, woman of color, whatever it is, just for that corporate gain. I don't believe in that. And in terms of my values, I mean, I firmly believe that if I don't stand by my own values and morals in any decision that I make, I feel like I lose a sense of my own identity. In my matriarchal family, while we're not super religious, a major part of our Catholic faith that we really incorporate into our daily lives is cultivating and practicing virtue by performing good acts, not for our own selfish reasons, but to show our love for one another as an expression of God's love, because every human life is valuable. And I firmly stand by that as a queer Latina woman who has met people from so many different walks of life. And us giving to others is really continually giving the best of ourselves, not for gain of any means. Now, when I'm in a moral dilemma, in a way, I go back to my Catholic and Hispanic roots because my culture is very collectivist. So we care about the whole of a community and are hyper attentive to the needs of others. So if I'm ever wronged, I was taught to turn the other cheek, to not allow more injury. And I really put in effort to try to understand the other person or people and not let the negativity have power over me. Because my time and my being is precious. So I can only give the limited energy that I have to what really serves me at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Oh, that was really well said. Yeah, you all are going to be like, how old is this young woman? My gosh, she's wise beyond her years. But you had matriarchs though in your family that set that precedent for you too.
Absolutely.
And empowered you with that. So which is so important. This is going to be a big one. You could go on for all day on this one. Living out of your own expectations versus others. This is so multifaceted for you. As a woman, as a Latina woman, as a queer Latina woman, as a 20-something, as an immigrant. I could go on and on and on. So, and those we talked about earlier, you wanted to do so well for your family and for your parents. And that's a heavy weight for anyone to carry. And again, I think we hear this a lot from our first generation young people as they're embarking out in the world and trying to honor their parents' sacrifice. So talk to me about getting to that space of living out of your own expectations versus others.
Yeah. And to your point, I could talk about this for hours. I think this is a really good topic and definitely very relevant. As I mentioned before, growing up, I put a lot of pressure on myself because my parents were the ones who decided that we were all going to move to the United States. We came here with nothing to our name, as I mentioned before in my stories from her story. We lived in my grandmother's apartment in Park Place and didn't know any English. And I grew up just remembering my parents telling me that they gave up any dreams that they had as children of being, an engineer or writer, which was the dream that they had when they lived back in Peru. Just giving up those dreams just for the potential opportunity that my brother and I could succeed here in some way. So when I was the first in my family to pick up this new language, since I learned it at a really young age, my parents made me do a lot of different activities, whether it was the violin, tennis, volleyball, swimming, spelling bees, etc. And it just felt like my growth within these activities and academics was a direct reflection of the work that they were putting in, working multiple heavy labor intensive jobs. So if I messed up in any way, my fear didn't solely just relate to their disappointment in me, but more so my own criticism of myself. So as I picked up the violin and sports, for example, I started getting addicted to this sense of competitiveness, where I felt that unless I was the very best, whether I was concertmaster of the orchestra or captain, the money and time that my parents spent with my lessons, with helping me improve, were a waste. And then when I didn't get these opportunities to be the leader, to get the recognition I thought I deserved, I got severely depressed. And as a kid, I didn't know what that feeling was. But later on, when I turned 11, I actually got a diagnosis and I would say nasty things to myself. And I was being bullied at the same time that all of that was happening. And I went through a lot of traumatic incidents that I don't really want to get too much into, but all of that mixed together just was not great. So once I started working on healing my inner child and telling myself that I wasn't, just saying these things to present me, but also me as a kid, like literally looking at photos of little me, that's when I started realizing I have to be true to myself and really live in my skin. So that was in college when I really started practicing that. And that's when I discovered other multifaceted parts of my identity, whether it was my queerness and really embracing that. And once I did embrace that, and I could speak more on that a bit later, that's when I truly felt like I was able to start really loving myself and putting in that self-care and that effort. And it was so, again, relieving, just understanding the complexities of my identity and doing it for me, not just for, my parents. Like they would tell me, don't do these things for us, do it for yourself. That's when I began that journey once I had that realization.
Yeah, you spoke to something really important, and I've done this work too, so I can speak to the power of it. That inner child work is so important, to go back to that 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 6-year-old self and hug her and tell her how proud of you that you are, and that she's doing great, and that she can release the reins now because you've got it. Like, I've felt the power of that. It is so healing. It is also really important if you're going to feel freedom. And if you don't understand what inner child work is, I'll put some links in the resources. I have a therapist as well. Yeah, can't say enough about therapy that I work through, but there's so much power in that. And this is something you can do yourself too. You can but you have to be able to identify it. I think it's really important. So you have to be able to pinpoint and identify. But I'm so glad you spoke to that, because that's really, really an important part of the healing process, and just in navigating that and realizing the weight, that it carries, and giving that inner child the release. Like, we've got this. We're okay now. We've got good practices. We're healthy. Thanks for your work. You can rest. I've got you. So I'm so glad you spoke to that. Accepting the layered aspects of ourselves, which you've kind of spoke to a little bit already, but all those pieces, all those layers that we unpack, that we peel back, and that make up who we are. Talk to me about your layers and accepting those layers and celebrating those layers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, learning more about who I am has been a journey similar to the stories from the other guests that have been featured on this podcast.
Yeah.
The Hispanic Latinx identity is very complex. As we have learned as a collective society over the past couple of years, we're not a monolith. So what resonates with one group might not resonate with another in terms of values and our form of expression. And when I was discovering my own identity throughout my life, I felt conflicts between various aspects of things that I identified with. For example, I knew I was queer since I was 6. My fluidity in gender expression and attraction to, the same gender, none of it was abnormal to me in the slightest. But even then, as a child, I knew that this part of me was in conflict, not just with my Catholic identity, because my family was definitely more religious back then, but also in conflict with my Hispanic identity, a culture that has historically oppressed the LGBTQIA community. And to be honest, I never felt comfortable coming out to my parents. I actually never have, even to this day. Until I was about 11, I actually thought I was lesbian. And this term queer, however, really appealed to me when I was in college. One of my favorite singers who identifies this way mentioned that it really encapsulates her fluidity in many ways, not just related to her attraction to women. And I embraced it, especially once I graduated, because some days I definitely feel more masculine. Other days I feel very feminine, and literally my expressions as a whole shift accordingly. And that perspective has really made me continue to accept and love myself because I understand myself better. And that has helped improve just the quality in all the relationships that I've had with everyone around me, whether it's personal, professional, and whatnot. Just being able to say, hey, I'm a Latina queer person, and having the safety net to be able to express myself in that way has been so relieving and amazing. And I'm glad that we've gotten to this point in our society.
Yeah. And I think we've seen huge leaps in that in the last 5 years. And with all of the hard stuff that's been the last 5 years, it's forced conversations around gender and how we respect people in terms of who they are, and how we're all beautiful and we were created this way. We were made to be this way. And so taking all the judgment out of that and embracing that, and also feeling safe enough to say it, because you're dealing with a lot of complex, environments and audiences that you're dealing with there. When you were a kid and you knew this, did you have peace with it, or was it something that was in conflict for you? Because as a kid, you don't have all those emotional tools, and so much was already being asked of you. I just want to go hug, 6-year-old Paula and be like, oh my gosh, hang in there, kid. You're going to be okay.
Yeah, she had to grow up really fast, like you mentioned before. And I don't know what it was. It just, even as a kid, when you have these inherent feelings, right? Because some people think that, you're gender identity, anything having to do with your identity is create nurtured. They call it the environment
Yes.
having an impact on you. I don't
Right.
believe that's true, because if I knew since I was 6, like, that I had
Right.
these feelings and that I identified this way, and even when I was playing house, for example, with my best friend at the time, I was always the dad, and I didn't think about gender roles. I was like, yeah, I'm going to be the dad, and I love my wife and my kids. It wasn't weird to me,
Yeah.
and I never judged myself for it. And I thought, hey, like, if I feel this way, then, seeing other people that felt that way too and identified that way, it just wasn't abnormal to me. And I will say, especially being Hispanic, especially in Hispanic media, because my parents had subscription to Peruvian channels or channels from South America, they would mock and say very even racist depictions of different communities, and it's so normalized. The jokes, it's just very offensive. So growing up seeing that, it puts you down in a way, and you kind of feel like you have to hide this big part of you. I mean, I still feel like I have to hide that part of me to this day. And it takes a toll on your mental health, I'll say that. But I mean, hey, if I could be open with, the world at least, and dress the way I want to dress just for my own benefit, because I want to, then that's all I need. And as a kid, it's a lot to process. I was very confused. I thought, okay, I just like women. Yeah, but it's fluid. You change. And I think college was a really great time for me to be able to reflect on that. And even post college with COVID, I mean, yes, a lot of negative things happened, but it gave me that time to really dig deep and confirm things that I had questioned before. And now this is me confirming all of that, I guess, and putting it out there.
Well, I love that. And thank you so much for your vulnerability and courage. Again, you just impress me all the time. And this is just another level of that. But also, Ju, I think never underestimating people out there, the microaggressions. You've got multiple levels of microaggressions that you've got to walk out every day. And the toll that takes on your emotional health, you've got to have a really solid sense of self. And I just, I think my plea is like, people, just be aware of how you're talking to people, be respectful, stop for 5 seconds and think, is there any way this is going to be hurtful? And I think that's an area we still have a lot of room to improve and grow in. But we're having the conversations. But thank you so much for your vulnerability and sharing that. In summary, in living out feel, finding empowerment, embracing layers, which I think you've defined beautifully today in this conversation. Talk to me about how that affects you and how you feel about yourself, as well as affects your relationships.
Absolutely. Well, reflecting on these various aspects of who I am over many years of my life, it has reminded me of the work that I put in for all those years to really feel comfortable in my own skin. And one of my beliefs is that loving yourself makes it easier to love someone else. I know some people say, oh, you have to fully love yourself before you love someone else. But no, I think it's a journey. So like any relationship, your relationship with yourself is dynamic and requires constant attention. And we all live with our own inner turmoil or demons, as some people would refer to it as. So no matter how much work we do or how much we progress in life, there are days when you're going to set back. And when you embrace your layers, all of it, the good, the morally questionable, whatever it is, you start
not just the fancy, not just stuff.
Exactly. Once you put in that work, you start confirming your non-negotiables, what you will tolerate from other people and what you won't. You seek less approval. You won't have as many holes or gaps to fill within you, because you can easily let go of what does not serve you. And you will be less afraid of being alone, because you'll find fulfillment from so many other aspects in your life. You'll be nicer to yourself and your inner child. You'll stop compromising. And once you get to that point, you'll truly find peace, because as I said earlier, your partner should bring you peace. And finally, the people left in your circle, after considering all of these factors, are just going to be the best quality people for you, who will only bring you forward in your journey. And I think over the past years, once I started, constantly looking at my inner circle, taking away, people, just constantly reassessing that part of my life, it has improved my life in so many ways, because the people that I have right now are just the best people ever, in my opinion. And they've seen me again through many ups and downs in my life, and they've still have been loyal, and yeah, we have a mutually beneficial thing going on. So that's what I want moving forward.
I love that. That's so great. And it's so exciting to hear you have that. I know I keep saying this at your age, because I mean, so many people I know, this discovery doesn't happen right away. This discovery happens through a lot of hard choices, hard experiences, decisions. And you see people in their 30s, 40s, 50s. I mean, I'm in my 50s now. But finding this about themselves and all the time they lost. I mean, it's not lost. I mean, there's value in it in most of the things we go through. Although sometimes shitty things just happen, and there's no value in that.
Exactly.
But so I love that you found this now and can say this now, because one of the things that we've started to identify too is this is our island. This is who, and these are the values that we withhold on our island. So we don't block people off of our island, but we block certain ways of, if you are not going to act in this way of being respectful, loving, kind, welcoming, valuing all humans, those, we have 3 or 4 values that my husband and I, over the last couple of years, as we've kind of re-identified all that we are and what we believe. So it's not, you mentioned it, it's a respect thing. And I think you have already done that. You're like, welcome to my island. If all of you that embody this, welcome aboard. If you don't embody in this, that I respect that. There's just not going to be space for you on my island.
Exactly. I love that.
Yeah. And I think it's just, I wish that we had done this so many years ago. So kudos to you again for getting on that, because it's going to make your life so much more. You're going to have contentment. Life is wild and it's going to throw you things, but it's going to allow you to walk through it with contentment and peace amongst the storm, because you've established this. You know it. There's no wavering. These are my values. These are the non-negotiables. I think that's a really important word. And you have to have those non-negotiables, or you're just fluttering around and you can't be firm. You don't have a foundation if you don't have those non-negotiables. So thanks so much for sharing that. We're down to our rapid fire. Name 5 activities that nourish you.
Ooh. Okay. I'll say number 1, going to the gym. Number 2, spending quality time with my friends, since that's one of my main love languages. Yeah. Number 3, going to conferences and networking events, which is really just me getting out of my comfort zone.
Sure.
Number 4, performing music in front of people. I honestly haven't performed music in such a long time, but I've been yearning to do so. So whenever that opportunity comes up, I know that it's such a good feeling. And number 5 is really getting to know my family on a deeper level, like really learning more about them and learning about their inner child too, because I know that, as my therapist said, the issues that I've had with my family in the past is really just, it involves, all their inner child, their background, the sacrifices they've made. So I've been able to let go of, the tension that we've had with just the complexities of my upbringing, and really try to understand them and where they're coming from before judging them for the decisions that they've made in the past and that they continue to make now, because we grew up in very different environments. So for me, that's just very fulfilling, just asking about their childhood, asking about their stories, because they love talking about themselves. They're amazing people. And it's really fascinating to get to know them better, because my family were badasses, and we got some really good stories and things to say. So as you know, like, they're really why I am the way I am too. So I love them, and hopefully they're listening.
Well, that's amazing. And they're survivors, honestly, you're all survivors. And what I love too is that that ability to hold a nuance of emotions, of recognizing this wasn't great and it put a lot of pressure on me, but I also, within their story, understand how we got here. And so that can give me a different lens and a different empathy. I'm not negating what happened and the damage it did. And I'm dealing with that now. I've named it. I'm going to therapy. I'm doing those things. At the same time, I can, I want to know more, because some of these things too, I think this is how we break down generational traumas. This is how we stop patterns and start new patterns and break into those things. So that willingness to not be so dualistic in our feeling of things are not black and white. There's a lot of gray out there, and being able to embrace both sides of that is so important. Name 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
Ooh, how I want to feel. I feel like because we're kind of getting closer to the new year, this is super relevant. I've been thinking about it. I definitely want to feel powerful. I think in my description, I go by this motto that my mom told me of being pequeña y poderosa, which in Spanish it translates to small, because yes, I'm a very petite girl, as you know, because you've seen me in person.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I own that. I'm petite, and you don't expect much from me when you see me in the room, but I am powerful, and I am going to assert myself to prove you wrong. That's kind of been an ongoing thing. So I want to feel powerful. I want to feel motivated, whether it's in the gym. I just want to continue reaching my goals, hitting new PRs constantly, and surprising myself with just what I'm physically capable of. Yeah, which I guess ties into the first one really well.
Yeah, don't underestimate this woman. I can tell you right now.
Yes. I mean, I've been doing pretty good with weights and stuff, so I've been impressing myself. So yeah, I just want to keep doing that. I want to feel fulfilled with my relationships, whether it's personal, professional. I think I've navigated a lot in terms of my relationships, so I just want to continue to be fulfilled and stick with my non-negotiables and my boundaries. I think that's 3. Okay. 4, I want to feel I don't know if this is the right word, knowledgeable. I just want to continue learning. I mean, being in healthcare communications, you work with clients that work in different disease spaces, and I'm a learner. I'm a passionate learner. So for me, it's really fascinating to be able to learn about the treatment options that are in clinical trials, to learn about patient populations, to learn about disparities within different disease states. So yeah, just continuing to be knowledgeable will definitely help me benefit and grow in that sense. Number 5, I want to be respected. Again, going back to the boundaries and just continuing to love myself, and going back to my values. And number 6, I guess I want to be resilient. Even though I've overcome so many things in my life so far, I know that there's so much more to come. I mean, I'm still very relatively early in my career and my adulthood. So I just want to continue to be resilient and persevere as much as I can, regardless of what comes my way, because that's the only way I'll be powerful is just really how I behave when I'm knocked down. What I do when I'm knocked down, that is more of a testament to my character than when things are going well. So I'm kind of excited for things to not go my way, because I can continue to, again, go back to my values and reinforce what I really bring to the table.
Paula, thank you so much. This was as good and so much more than I expected to be. I'm so honored that you took the time with me today. It's been so great reconnecting with you. Field podcast audience, you're going to want to maybe come back and listen to this a couple times. Bring your notepad. But you can find us on all the socials, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, maybe Twitter. We'll see. Twitter's in a weird time right now. Maybe Twitter, maybe not. But today, Twitter, as well as YouTube. We have our website, embracinglayers.com, where you'll be able to find sources that Paula shares, where you're able to learn more about her and her journey. There'll be a blog on this episode leading up to it, and you're going to want to have and listen and share all of this. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today, Paula. I'm so thankful. And podcast audience, have a great week.